Alright, what is up everybody? We are back with a brand new video, and today we are going to cover Flexbox for CSS. I learned Flexbox a little over a year ago, and it's changed the entire way I've written my CSS. And one more thing before we jump in, if you have not liked this video and subscribed, please do so. I really do appreciate it. So let's jump right into it. Okay, so before we jump into any code, we're going to cover these two PowerPoint slides very quickly just to kind of give you some background on what Flexbox is and how we're going to apply it. So for anyone that doesn't know what Flexbox is, it is a modern CSS3 layout mode that supplies a clean and easy way to arrange items within a container. So in layman's terms, it just makes your life a whole lot easier when doing your designing of a web page through CSS. There are three main advantages of Flexbox compared to normal CSS, and the first one, which is the most important, is there are no annoying floats. So floats can be very tedious, and I know I explained them in my previous CSS videos because you should learn floats when learning the basic CSS, but now that you're going to know Flexbox, you're really not going to need to know them. And then the second advantage is the simplified placement for child elements. They can get very confusing when you're working with multiple child or children and figuring out which parent they belong to and also the CSS for them, so that makes it a lot more simplified. And then for the third advantage of Flexbox, it is that it is responsive and also works on a mobile device. And what I mean by that is it will conform with the width of the screen that you're working with, whether it be a tablet or a mobile device, which I will show you later on. And then moving on to the second slide, we have our Flexbox Properties, which I kind of just laid out the most popular ones that we're going to be using in this video. The first one is Display Flex or Inline Flex. This just lets the system know that you are going to be using Flexbox. And then for the second one, we have Flex Direction, which is either a row or a column. We will mainly use rows in this video, but I will show you how to make it a column as well and what it looks like. The third one, we have Flexwrap, which I will go over wraps as well. Flex Basis, which is also another word for width, but you do need to use Flex Basis within Flexbox. Justify Content is another popular one that you'll be using. Flex Start and Flex End kind of just means left and right, like just picture you reading left to right, and then center is a center, obviously. Align Self and Align Items and Align Content all go together, but I will show the difference in the video. Flex Grow, Flex Shrink all kind of bind together inside Flex, which has an integer. And then order we will go over as well. So without further ado, let's hop into our text editor and start learning Flexbox. Alright, so before we jump into the code for Flexbox, I just wanted to point out that I have a server extension over here, a live server extension that I just downloaded through Visual Studio Code, and anyone can get it. It's free, you just have to install it, and once you do, you can pull it up in your browser, and you are able to just live reload anything that you change in the text editor, just to save some time. And also, I just have a basic HTML5 layout here. I just have a div with a class of container1, and then 3 more divs inside of it with a class of box1, box2, and box3, and then an h1 that just says box1, box2, box3, and then we have a paragraph with some sample text in here as well. So if we head over to the CSS, so this is going to be where all the Flexbox properties are placed. If I scroll down here a little bit, I can show you that for container 1, every single div inside of container 1 has a default border of 1 pixel solid light gray and a padding of 10 pixels just to kind of push it off the edges and not make it look as ugly. And so for the first Flexbox property that we're going to insert, it's actually going to be in container 1 up here, and as you can see I have display flex, and then the rest of these that are in comments I'm going to discuss in a little bit here, but just know that you need to always call display flex inside the container that you're working with. And so for this container, we have the box 1, box 2, and box 3 over here, which if I were to scroll down, you can see that I have a little bit of CSS for them. Just by default, I have a background just to make it look a little more aesthetically pleasing. But the first thing we're going to cover are flex and order. And so if I were to put a 1 inside of all of these for flex and all 3, and then reload, it's not going to change anything because it just sets the boundary for all 3 boxes. So if I were to change the middle one to 2 as the live reload, you'll see that that becomes like the main paragraph of it, or the main heading that you want, and the 2 other ones are side ones because this one has 2 and the other one is 1. If you want to change the top one to 2 as well and save it, you'll see that those 2 become the larger boxes and this one even becomes smaller. And so this just makes it a lot easier to center certain headings that you're working with, and this is kind of my emphasis on the no floats part. It's really nice to not have to worry about clearing floats and whatnot, which I did discuss in the previous videos, so if you haven't watched those, please go watch them because it's good to know, but this does make your life a whole lot easier. And then another thing I wanted to show you guys was the order. This is also another simple property of Flexbox, but it can go a long way. So let's just say we want to take this back down to 1, just so box 1 was the main heading. And let's say we wanted to get box 1 in the middle of box 2 and box 3. We can change the order around. So for box 1, we want it to be in the second place. For box 2, we want it to be in the first place. And then for box 3, that's going to stay in the third place. So if we were to reload this, you're going to see box 1 will move to the center, and it's just that easy. So once we paste it on the outside and live reload, you can see that it takes the space from the bottom. This is because this box 1 is expanded further than the rest, so even though it has the same amount of text, it's actually pushed up a little higher because the text can't go as far. So Flex Start takes it from the bottom. If I were to do Flex End in live reload, it takes it from the top. And then, as you can guess, if I were to do Flex Center in live reload, it's going to place it right in the middle. And so we're just going to delete this for now. I'm going to leave it as a comment just so you guys have it to look at, and those are all 3 of them right there. And then the next thing that I pointed out in the PowerPoint earlier was the flex direction column. So if we were to paste this in here and save it, it's going to turn it into a column. So you have the option to go column or row. For this, we are going row, so I will delete it, but that's there just so you guys know. So for the next portion of this video, we are going to cover widths in Flexbox, and to do that, I'm going to uncomment this container 2 that I already had in here. Just to show you these guys, or the boxes inside this one. So we have box 4, box 5, and box 6. And just to kind of keep the aesthetic rolling, I did give them some background colors. And so if we come back over to the main CSS, we can start going over the Flexbox Properties. And you're probably wondering why it doesn't stretch the entire width of the page like box 1, 2, and 3 does. And that's because I specified a width here, or in other terms, flex basis. So if you ever need to use width in Flexbox, you have to use flex basis. And I gave it a width of 27% just for the sake of this video. So if I were to take that out and save it, you see that it will stretch the whole thing, but we do need to switch it back to 27 for the properties that I'm about to go over. So like I said earlier, we can't really do much inside Flexbox if we don't have display flex inside the container. So for container 2, we already have the display flex here. And then as you can see, I have all this justified content jibber jabber inside this comment right now. So we're going to go over each and every one individually. And so if we were to take the first one and copy and paste it just to place it on the outside of the comment and save it, you can see that it does nothing because Flex Start actually pushes it to the left anyways. Think about how we read left to right. So it starts on the left, and then if we were to type in end on here and save it, it's going to push it to the right. So it's a lot easier than floats, like I said multiple times before, but once you start using it, you'll realize how much of a time saver it actually is. So then if we were to do just center, it'll place it right in the center for us. And so the last 2 come in handy just because in the middle here they're kind of jumbled up. So you know, most likely you would want some margin in the middle. So if we were to do space around, you're going to see that it puts margin all around it, as you can, guess from space around. But if we were to just do space between, it's going to keep it flush with the sides. So I think that looks much better. So you can use whatever you're looking for, but those are the 2 simple options for placing margin. That's a lot easier than establishing it yourself and figuring out the width and all the math. So I'm just going to keep it space between for now just for the sake of this video, but the next thing I want to talk about is actually a media query. So if I were to come over to here and push this in, if you were on a tablet or a mobile device, this is not going to look good, especially if you have 3 columns and 2 rows. So to get around that and make it more responsive, we're going to actually add in a media query. So if we type in @media and then a parentheses and then our brackets, we can copy and paste container 1 and to actually cut it and just toss it in here, and then we can save it. But if we need to identify a width that we want, so we need to do min width, and so we're going to make our width just like 650 pixels. That should work for this. If we save it, come over here, you see nothing happens yet because we haven't reached that threshold yet. But once we do, as we expand it, nothing will happen. But once we get within that 650, they will all go to columns. So if you're on a mobile device or a tablet, it'll make it much easier to read what's ever on the page and won't look as squished. Okay, and for the last portion of this video, we're going to cover wraps, and we're going to do that by adding in this container 3. So if I were to uncomment this and live reload it, you'll see we have boxes 7 through 12 come in over here. And if we go to the CSS, you can see that I just gave the same basic properties that I did with container 1 div and container 2 div. So all 3 containers have the same basic properties of a border of 1 pixel solid light gray and then a padding of 10 pixels as well. Alright, so inside container 3, as you can see, we have the default display flex that we're going to need for any Flexbox property. And then for Flexwrap, there's nothing in there right now just because I want to show you guys what happens if you don't put anything in there. So that's the media query right there that we did earlier. But when we do that for no wrapping at all, they kind of just go off the page. They don't go anywhere. They don't go underneath. And so this is the whole point of wrapping elements in Flexbox. So if we were to add in wrap in here and save it, and then come over here and do the same thing, that's going to happen. And then these boxes are actually going to wrap below. So everything stays on the page for either a mobile device or even the web page in general. So as you can see, box 11 is there right now, but once we hit that end of the width, it's going to push it to the bottom. So that's the whole concept of wrapping. Alright, so that wraps up this tutorial for Flexbox. I really hope you guys enjoyed it. If you did, please give the video a thumbs up. And if you had any questions, because I know we did cover a lot, please let me know in the comments down below. I'd be more than happy to answer them. And I'll catch you guys in the next one.
Closer, closer, closer than I've ever been.